What's going on, y'all? Welcome to the Memorial Day edition of the Liberty Cast. I'm your host, Big E. Honestly, folks, I am beyond distressed by what's going on in this country right now. And it's not the Chinese coronavirus. We will get into that, but first we're going to talk about the shooting of Breonna Taylor in Kentucky and why it should scare every legal gun owner. We'll also talk about the hot mess that is Chicago and the state of Illinois as a whole, really. And there are a few other stories I want to touch on, and we'll get into those if we have time. And I also want to talk a little bit about Memorial Day and what it means. But there's a lot I want to get into, so let's just dive right in. Before we get into a lot of the meat of the show, I do want to talk about Memorial Day and what it actually means. I had to do a home project, and I went to pick up some material, and the guy that I bought the material from, really nice guy, patriotic, but he said to me as I was leaving, "Happy Memorial Day." And I was kind of in a hurry because he was late. I didn't really want to get into a discussion about what it means. His heart was in the right place, so I just let it go. But you don't wish somebody a happy Memorial Day. You can tell somebody to enjoy their weekend. It's a long weekend, and everybody likes to enjoy that, even in the midst of this coronavirus nonsense. People are still going to hopefully gather together and enjoy some adult beverages and hot dogs and burgers on the grill and things like that. But it's not something to wish somebody a happy Memorial Day, because it is a somber occasion. And it's something that even while you're enjoying your adult beverages and your burgers and dogs, we need to keep in mind that this is the memorial. We're memorializing our soldiers that paid the ultimate sacrifice for this country. And not just those soldiers, but the families that are left behind. And that's always something that has bothered me about this holiday, when people just blurt that out because it's another holiday that they get to celebrate with a long weekend. And I'm not saying that people are heartless or cruel. I'm not saying that people are anything other than just not fully appreciating and not paying attention to, I should say, not paying attention to what it means. And I think we would all do well to keep that in mind when we're indulging and enjoying the long weekend. I don't want to belabor the point. I don't want to get into the history of Memorial Day and all that. I think I did that last year, actually. I just want to put that out there, that we're paying attention to the meaning of why we have the day off on Monday, and just to be mindful of that. And so just try not to say Happy Memorial Day. Enjoy your weekend and enjoy the festivities, stuff like that. But just be mindful of the fact that men and women died. Men and women made the ultimate sacrifice so that you could have that 3-day weekend. All right, I just wanted to get that out there before we got rolling with the show and ran out of time before I had a chance to address it. So now let's get into the meat of the show. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. I'm sure by now most of you have probably heard about Breonna Taylor and what happened with her in Kentucky back on March 13th. Now, according to reports, Breonna Taylor and her boyfriend, Kenneth Walker, were asleep in their apartment around 1 a.m. on the morning of March 13th when 3 plainclothes police officers with the Louisville Metro Police Department arrived to execute a search warrant in a drug case. Now, at 1 a.m., They're awoken by banging, and they believe that their apartment was being broken into. Now, when the officers broke down the door, they believed they were victims of a home invasion. They called 911, and Kenneth Walker grabbed a gun and opened fire, and he hit one officer in the leg. Officers obviously returned fire, hit Breonna Taylor 8 times. Now, she wasn't armed. The boyfriend was licensed to carry and kept guns in the apartment, but he wasn't hit, and he was the one that actually opened fire. A bit strange. Breonna Taylor's mother filed a lawsuit where she accused the officers of blindly firing more than 20 rounds into the apartment. The fact that Taylor was shot 8 times and the man who actually was holding the gun and opened fire on them was not hit tends to support that claim. And then he was arrested on charges of assault with attempted murder on a police officer. I really hope that charge gets dropped, because that's insane. Now, Taylor and Walker, they had no criminal history, no drug convictions, no drugs were found in the apartment during the raid. And all of that is mentioned in the lawsuit, and we haven't had a chance to read any of the police reports of yet. I haven't seen any yet. They probably are keeping those under wraps because the lawsuit is pending and things of that nature. But here's the thing. If you bust down my door, you will be met with as much force as I have at my disposal. I'm not a criminal. I don't travel in criminal circles. And I have no expectation that at any moment the cops are going to come and bust down my door. Now, the way some of these tyrants around the country are seizing and wielding power, that could change. But my wife and I live a life that carries zero risk of police intervention, short of maybe speeding. But that's just between you and me. But if I hear someone trying to break into my home, I have no reason to suspect that it might be the police. And I will protect my family in the same way that Kenneth Walker tried to protect his girlfriend. And no one should expect anything less. Now, the reason why they broke down the door to that apartment, they had a no-knock warrant issued and approved by a judge. And a no-knock warrant means that they don't have to announce themselves. They don't have to ring a doorbell, nothing. They can just pull up and use a battering ram and make entry into your apartment or your house. Now, do you think that if leftists gain control and are able to implement their anti-gun agenda, that they won't hesitate to issue no-knock warrants against us, law-abiding gun owners? And yes, I do believe that they are that corrupt that even without having committed a crime, something like that could happen. Do you think that they won't hesitate to use no-knocks against those of us who refuse to cooperate with their tyrannical mask orders or refusing a vaccine? But anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. What if the cops just make a mistake? It's happened too many times to count. You go into some of these neighborhoods with cookie cutter houses, they all look similar. Addresses are transposed. Same color cars in the driveways. And of course, there is the possibility of rogue cops, like what happened last year in Houston. But even after this last shooting of Breonna Taylor, I believe that no-knock warrants had their place. But after doing some research for this segment of the show, I can't say that I still believe that. There are too many things that can and do go wrong far too often. And that should scare the daylights out of every law-abiding gun owner, now more than ever. Now, in this particular case, publicly available records show that the investigation was centered around a house more than 10 miles away from Taylor's apartment. And records show that they were actually looking for a man named Jamarcus Glover, who lived in a completely different part of the city and was already in custody when this raid took place. Now, her address was listed on the search warrant based on the Louisville Metro Police Department's belief that this guy, Glover, had used Taylor's apartment to receive mail, keep drugs, or stash money. And the warrant also stated that a car registered to Taylor had been seen parked on several occasions in front of a, quote, drug house that Glover frequented. So there's a lot of red flags in this case being raised. We don't know all the facts. We're going to have to wait for them, obviously. But, like I said, there are a lot of flags here. So we need answers, and I really hope we get them soon. Now, there are calls for a federal investigation, and some of those calls have come from people like Kamala Harris. And I know, at least in her case, it's based on race. And they're looking at it through a racist lens. But this type of thing happens across all races. Ann Riley in Alabama was shot by police on another botched no-knock raid. Ms. Riley is white. So no matter how much they want us to believe that this is about race, it's not. It's about the issue of when there's a possibility that someone could lose their life, you better be damn sure that you're in the right. Concealed carry permit holders are trained. If you draw, it better be in defense of your life or the life of someone else. It has to be a last resort. And somebody busted into your house at 1 a.m. certainly qualifies. But that said, with no-knock warrants issued by the police, there's almost always another way. Because again, if you're a law-abiding citizen and the cops make a mistake, and you own guns for self-defense, and you engage those police officers because you're exercising your Second Amendment right to defend yourself, to defend your home, to defend your family, to defend your property, that is a tragedy waiting to happen that could easily be avoided. But before we move on, I want to put this question to the audience. What do you all think? Do you think that no-knock warrants should be abolished? Do you think that they serve their purpose and this was just a tragic accident that is just par for the course, is just something that we have to deal with these no-knock warrants? What do you think? Let me know in the comment section, or shoot me an email, Twitter. I would love to know what you guys think about the situation. This Chinese coronavirus pandemic has brought out the tyrant in a lot of people, notably in Chicago. Chicago is a hot mess right now. And I think that's a reflection of the mayor, because she herself is a hot mess. And so is Governor Pritzker, for that matter. We'll talk about him later. But Mayor Lightfoot, I can't bring myself to call her Lori anymore, because when I think of women with that name, Lori Loughlin immediately comes to mind. Not just because she's in the news lately, but she's pleasant to look at. Lightfoot, not by any Mr. Fantastic stretch. Well, maybe in Don Lemon's mind, but he likes guys. But we're getting off topic. Early on, when Mayor Lightfoot was issuing tyrannical lockdown orders, like your typical totalitarian, she was not living by the standards she set forth, and went and got a haircut.
I'm out in the public eye, and I'm a person who, I take my personal hygiene very seriously. As I said, I felt like I needed to have a haircut. I'm not able to do that myself, and so I got a haircut.
Like she's the only one in Chicago now who needs to pay attention to their hygiene. I mean, come on. Just ridiculous. But then some kids threw a party, and she got pissed off about that and said this.
Now, I've directed Superintendent Brown to order all police districts to give special attention to these parties. And this is how it's going to be. We will shut you down, we will cite you, and if we need to, we will arrest you, and we will take you to jail. Period. There should be nothing unambiguous about that. Don't make us treat you like a criminal. But if you act like a criminal and you violate the law and you refuse to do what is necessary to save lives in the city in the middle of a pandemic, we will take you to jail, period.
And then she got even more pissed off when pastors decided they were going to hold church services. And she sent them a letter and threatened to do the same thing to people going to church. Have any of these tyrants, have any of them heard of, much less read, the Bill of Rights? Have they heard of or read the Constitution, the Federalist Papers? Do they have any inkling about the history of how this country was founded? Now, based on what's happening around the country right now, I'm going to have to say no. And based on debates that I've gotten into online and others that I've seen and just decided not to engage, most people haven't. This is disturbing, distressing on many levels. And we will get into why, but first we're going to take a quick break. I was going to get rolling, and that segment ran a little bit longer than I wanted it to. So let's see if we can motor through the rest of the show. But Lightfoot's treatment of the church is emblematic of the left's disdain for, and in some cases, hatred of, the church or Christianity. Liquor stores and Planned Parenthood are supposedly essential businesses. But churches, no, can't have that. Stay home. People exercising their faith in something other than government is obviously unacceptable. Congregate settings like churches and AA meetings. The left abhors anything that threatens to supplant their almighty government as the be-all, end-all. They're doing their best to take advantage of this crisis and create as much dependency on the government as they possibly can. That's why they increased unemployment benefits such that it would be more than many people were earning from their jobs. Now, as a result of that, some businesses cannot reopen. They'll have to shutter if they can't find replacements, because workers are going to get those calls to come back. And they're going to say, you know what? I'm making more money from unemployment, so thanks, but no thanks. But then when the benefits run out, the number of businesses in operation won't be able to support the number of applicants that will be trying to get back into the workforce. So they'll end up on welfare, Medicaid, SSI, whatever social service program they can until they either get a job or die off. And getting back to Chicago, it's not just Lightfoot. Governor J.B. Pritzker, B probably stands for billionaire, is every bit the totalitarian that Lightfoot is. He's extended the statewide lockdown until May 30th, and I can almost guarantee, just like Whitmer, he's going to extend it even further. I mean, he's already indicated that he has no plans to lift the restrictions on gatherings of 10 or more people. So it only stands to reason that he's going to go ahead and just extend the stay-at-home order, perhaps till the end of June. One last thing about Chicago before we move on, and this point I'm about to make about Chicago does have national implications. You know how we've been talking about, or the notion that the Chinese coronavirus death toll numbers are inflated. Dr. Birx essentially confirmed it. But you still see people talking about it's a conspiracy theory. They're buying into the number of deaths that are attributable to the Chinese coronavirus. Anybody who says anything different is a conspiracy theorist, is stupid, hasn't done research, whatever the case may be. The director of the Illinois Department of Public Health has confirmed it again. And no matter what you say to people, they're still going to say it's a conspiracy theory. But listen to what Dr. Ngozi Ezike has to say. She's the director of the Illinois Department of Public Health. Listen to her explanation of how the Chinese coronavirus deaths are being recorded.
I just want to be clear in terms of the definition of people dying of COVID. So the case definition is very simplistic. It means at the time of death, it was a COVID positive diagnosis. So that means that if you were in hospice and had already been given, a few weeks to live, and then you also were found to have COVID, that would be counted as a COVID death. It means that even if you died of a clear alternate cause, but you had COVID at the same time, it's still listed as a COVID death. So everyone who's listed as a COVID death doesn't mean that that was the cause of the death, but they had COVID at the time of death. I hope that's helpful.
Oh, it's helpful, Doc. It's exactly what we've been saying all along. But we've been called conspiracy theorists for saying it. She said exactly what we have been saying. She used medical terminology, but she said the exact same thing. There's no need for any explanation. So can we stop with the conspiracy theory nonsense? The numbers are inflated. But her explanation begs a question. Why? What possible reason could there be for recording the death of someone whose cause of death was clearly something other than the Chinese coronavirus, and yet because they tested positive, recording it as the coronavirus? What possible reason could there be for that, other than to push a narrative? If there's another explanation, please enlighten me. I can't think of one. All right, we're going to take another quick break. And when we get back, we're going to dive deeper into what is distressing about the response to this Chinese coronavirus. And after that, we'll get you out of here with some, I don't want to say epic stupidity, but some really sad stupidity. But we'll get into all of that on the other side of this break. The Chinese coronavirus pandemic has driven home in a way that hasn't been driven home to me in quite some time just how badly our education system has failed. I've mentioned on this show before that generations before us, the antebellum generation, the greatest generation, and maybe to a certain extent, the earliest members of the baby boomers. And that goes from the early 1900s, 1902 or 1905, something like that, up until the early 1950s. But those generations had the benefit of actually getting an education. By the time the baby boomers came along, the seeds of sabotage of our education system had already started to sprout. And those seeds have not only borne fruit now, but have grown into an orchard of anti-American socialist trees. Americans used to be proud to be Americans. America and the ideals that this country stood for have made it the greatest country in the history of the world. Now, whenever I bring up the Constitution in this discussion, I get responses like, I don't remember reading that in the Constitution, or you're hiding behind the Constitution, blah, blah, blah. I almost always disengage at that point because I know that that person is irrational and can't be reasoned with. This is an emotional time for all of us. And especially so for people with family who are vulnerable or immunocompromised. And if you follow me on social media, you've seen me acknowledge their situations. But it betrays a stunning ignorance of our history and a lack of sophistication in their thinking. And it's infuriated me and saddened me at the same time that so many people are not only okay with our response to the Chinese coronavirus, they're not only okay with these tyrants going around issuing edicts telling people to stay home, declaring certain businesses non-essential, telling people they have to wear this or they have to do that. They're not only okay with that, but they think that those of us who respect the Constitution and base our objections to these tyrannical edicts on it are selfish, don't care about our fellow Americans. They call us hypocrites for carrying guns for protection but not wanting to wear a mask. The fact that the government hasn't demanded that anyone who didn't want to carry a gun carry one is completely lost on them. They call us stupid for, quote, hiding behind the Constitution. And in some cases saying that we lack the intellect to really understand the Constitution. And they say things like they never read any amendment that protects the right to be an asshole. Again, betraying their own lack of understanding of the Constitution because it absolutely protects the right to be an asshole. It protects a racist right to wear Klan robes and spew racist rhetoric, or be a Nazi and praise Hitler. It protects a bigot's right to express hatred towards homosexuals. As long as you don't assault anyone or incite someone else to hurt people or and break the law in some other way, the Constitution absolutely protects your right to be an asshole. These people either forgot or were never taught why the Constitution was written and what it actually means. You don't get to chill my rights because it will make you feel better. You don't get to infringe on my rights because you're afraid of a virus with a over 99% survival rate. There's no clause in the Constitution or amendment to the Constitution that states that in case of a global pandemic, the document is null and void. By all means, do what you need to do to stay healthy and keep your family healthy and safe. That is your responsibility. If your circumstances dictate that you need to stay home or wear a mask, do so. If you're sick with the virus, stay home. None of this is new. It's called being an adult. Washing hands, covering coughs and sneezes with your arm. These are things that adults do and have done. And I mean, before we knew about the Chinese coronavirus, people in California were getting sick at a higher rate than usual. And it was thought to be just a bad flu season. Now with this new virus, they want us to completely alter our way of life based on ridiculously faulty projections and models with no empirical evidence supporting such a shift. And whenever you mention the states that had no lockdown or countries like Sweden, they just gloss over it and move on to the next talking point because they can't refute it. And it turns out that almost since day one, when the first models by discredited Neil Ferguson from Imperial College came out, there were other experts like Professor Sunetra Gupta from Oxford who produced models completely contradicting his. but no one paid attention to them because his models allowed them to sow fear and create panic. Almost as if I said before, there was an agenda being pushed. Now, contrary to the left's wish, this is still the United States of America. And we, the people, are still protected under the Constitution. The wannabe despots around the country imposing their ridiculous lockdowns need an education, but not the indoctrination they got in public school or university, but an actual education. But here's the thing. This is distressing now in real time because the people in power were indoctrinated during their education. But what's going to happen when the people who are in school now end up in these positions of power? These are the people who have been indoctrinated from day one. And now that everything has already shifted left, shifted so far left, when those people get into power, if there hasn't been any kind of balance brought to it, if conservatives don't get it together and get involved in education, homeschool their kids, whatever the case may be, and get a handle on this leftist ideology being pushed on the public school system, we're in trouble. We're in serious, serious trouble. I know that wasn't the most fun segment to listen to, but I can't stress enough how disturbing and how frightening this phenomenon is. So I really want to drive that home. But let's move on to the last story I have for you today, or the last story that we have time for today, actually, and get you out here so that you can enjoy the rest of your weekend. So earlier this week, I was informed by our former VP, Joe Biden, that I ain't black.
Listen, you got to come see us when you come to New York, VP Biden.
I will.
It's a long way until November. We got more questions.
You got more questions, but I tell you, if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, then you ain't black.
It don't have nothing to do with Trump. It has to do with the fact I want something for my community. I would love to see
Take a look at my record, man. I extended the voting rights 25 years. I have a record that is second to none. The NAACP has endorsed me every time I've run. Come on. Take a look at the record. Anyway, thanks. I will come back.
All right.
I look forward to seeing you in person.
Okay, absolutely.
Okay, pal. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it, Charlamagne.
That was from Joe Biden's appearance on a show called The Breakfast Club, hosted by Charlamagne the God. Whatever. I'm not terribly familiar with this guy, Charlamagne. I know who he is. I've seen some of his interviews of other people before. But I do appreciate the way he handled that, because he could have gotten indignant, like I know some people would have, but he just kept it moving, said it wasn't about Trump, and kept it rolling, and he handled it as well as could be expected, and I appreciated the way he handled it. Now, this is not new. I've been dealing with stuff like this for my entire life. I remember hearing that I talk white as early as junior high. I had girls that I was crushing on tell me that I talked and acted white. But what does that even mean? When you look at me, there is no mistaking me for white. But apparently, having parents who were educated and taught me how to speak English, and it wasn't even anything that they said specifically, it wasn't that they corrected me or anything like that. It was just that my parents were college educated. I know that doesn't mean a whole lot these days, but they are college grads with advanced degrees and spoke English properly. So, like most kids, I emulated the way they spoke. And very little slang was spoken in our house, and they didn't have a Southern accent. I've also been confronted by black people who are incensed that as a black man, I didn't and wouldn't vote for Obama. When I asked them why they would vote for him, they said it was about time we had a black president. Or he's black, so I'm just going to vote for him. Okay, but is there anything about him aside from his skin color that would make you vote for him? And no one I ever posed that question to could articulate anything beyond his skin color. And that held for white people when I posed that question to them. I hardly ever got asked why I wouldn't vote for him, but when I did, I didn't have to think about it. He's a Democrat. He's for late-term partial birth abortion. And he's anti-gun. Ironically, he turned out to be the greatest gun salesman this country has ever seen. And I bet he hates that accolade, but it's true. But to hear Biden say this is not the least bit surprising. The left has taken for granted the black voting bloc for 50 years. So to hear a nearly 80-year-old white leftist lecture a black man about his authenticity as a black man is somewhat jarring, but not surprising. I mean, this is something you would expect to hear on a secret recording of a closed fundraiser, like when they recorded Mittens talking about how 47% of the people didn't pay taxes. And I think the pre-dementia Biden of even 4 years ago might have been with it enough not to say this out loud. Well, I don't know, maybe not. But you know that's what every white leftist thinks. Black folks have voted for Democrats at a 85 to 90% clip for decades. So is it any surprise really that they take the black vote for granted? But here's the thing. If they lose 10% of that, if the percentage of black people voting Democrat goes down to 75, 80%, the Democrats will never win another election. So even though they've taken it for granted for so long, they're terrified of losing it. And this is the first time in decades that there might even be a hint, a whiff of a chance that they might. But we'll see. Anyway, folks, we're out of time. I wanted to get to Alan Dershowitz and his statement about forced vaccines, and I wanted to dive into some of the data that Professor Sunetra Gupta presented. We'll have to do that another time. But I do want to thank you all for spending this time with me. Please check us out on your favorite podcast platform. Like us, download, leave a review, let us know what you think. You can find us on any of whatever your favorite podcast platform is. Chances are we're there. Check us out on social media. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Parlay, at The Liberty Cast on all 4 platforms. The website, thelibertycast.net. As soon as you pull it up, you come to the homepage, and that has all the latest shows. You can also find us on therightway.site, therightway.site. Go to their podcast page, and you'll find us there as well. But again, folks, thank you all for listening. Please enjoy your Memorial Day. Be safe. Don't drink and drive your boat or your car. Enjoy your adult beverages and take a moment just to remember why we have this 3-day weekend and why we're acknowledging Memorial Day. Wow, this really has been a depressing show this week, huh? We'll try to do something a little more upbeat next week. But anyway, folks, I do want to thank you again for listening. And as usual, keep your head on a swivel and stay safe, everybody.